Greetings and happy Easter to you. On this day, we gather to remember that it was on a quiet, early Sunday morning that the world first heard the news that Jesus had risen from the dead. We call it the resurrection. What was Jesus' resurrection? Was it a resuscitation of Jesus? Well, resuscitation happens all the time in hospitals. People's hearts stop, they stop breathing, and they get brought back. Was it like the raising of Lazarus from the dead, which was clearly fantastic, but we have to remember that Lazarus eventually died again, and he stayed in the grave. Something so much more astonishing than that happened that first Easter Sunday. Jesus rose again to life eternal. And in so doing, he rewrote the fundamental truth of human existence. Death and judgment are no longer the dreadful end of our stories. But these lessons that we've learned in life, they hold on. If I can say it, they die hard. And the question for us is, are we open to the idea that Jesus has changed things? Let me read from Luke chapter 24, beginning in verse 1. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they, a number of women, went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared, and they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were perplexed about this, behold, two men stood by them in dazzling apparel. And as they were frightened and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, "Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and on the third day rise." And they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 disciples, and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the mother of James, and the other women with them who told these things to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter rose and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves, and he went home marveling at what had happened. Now, if you're someone who has trouble wrapping your mind around the idea of the resurrection, trouble understanding it and believing it could be true, you're in good company. Even the disciples, the men and the people that walked with Jesus for years who had heard him teach on this, they couldn't help but just go back to their understanding of the first lessons of mortality that they learned in this life. Jesus told them that he would rise again, but they looked for him in the tomb, because where else would you find a dead man? But that's where they met the angels. That's where the women met the angels. And behold, two men stood by them in dazzling apparel, and they were frightened and bowed their faces to the ground. And the men said to them, "Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen." This is among my favorite passages because there's some humor in all of this. The angel saying, "Why are you here? He's gone. He told you." And they remembered while he was in Galilee, the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified on the third day. They remembered his words. The announcement of the new reality, that the darkness that we live with, these uncompromising and fear-inducing truths, they have been rewritten. He is not here. He has risen. And with the resurrection, life becomes stronger than death. This is an amazing idea. Almost unbelievable. In my own studies of the world and the universe, astronomy, cosmology, has led me to believe that the cosmos is a wondrous and beautiful place, but it's also cold and harsh and inhospitable to life. But God's work in the universe gives rise not simply to life itself, but to life that overcomes the cold dark of death. Understand this about the resurrection, the idea of the resurrection. It is the beginning of the end of decay and death. And so living in light of the resurrection means we live in hope. The glimmer of hope caused Peter to go see, is Jesus alive? Could it be true? And so he runs. He runs to the tomb and he sees the cloths laying by themselves. And he marvels. He's not sure what to make of it. But he begins to hope. And hope, it can bring us from a place of despair to re-engaging with life. The dread and fear of death, it can rob us of life while we're still living. But that is defeated by the hope of the resurrection. John Owen was a Puritan theologian. He taught on the Christian life. He wrote extensively about it. He had extensive correspondence with other Christians. And while he was on his deathbed, he was dictating a letter to help others, to encourage others, even as he himself was facing death. And when he lay on that deathbed, his secretary wrote in his name to a friend, "I am still in the land of the living." But Owen said, stop, change that. Change that to say, "I am yet in the land of the dying, but I hope to soon be in the land of the living." The hope of life eternal, the hope of the resurrection, led Owen to believe that he would know a greater life in heaven, but ultimately in the resurrection, and it led him to live to the very end of his earthly life. And so we too can also live. We can know joy. The truth of death, to which we are held prisoner, is overturned. And when dread and fear are dispelled, it naturally gives way to joy. To joy. When we are parted from those we love by death, when we think of leaving those we love because of death, it can be a bitter thing. And we can live in that bitterness. We can live in that darkness. But the resurrection gives us reason to live in joy. Not in denial, not in anger, not in despair, but in confidence and hope and expectation that God will turn all things to good. But the real question for us is, what do we believe? What do you believe? Is resurrection an event that gives us good reason to hope, or is it just a story? Your belief or unbelief doesn't change whether it really happened or not, but your belief will connect you to the power of that reality. So this Easter, reflect on your life. Reflect on whether you are living by first lessons, learned about mortality, and possibly in its bitterness and despair, or do you see a pattern of life lived in light of the resurrection, in light of hope, in light of joy? And if you don't live in that pattern, isn't it worth your time to consider the reality of the resurrection, the hope of the resurrection? Because to live life, you need hope. You need to know joy. And resurrection gives us reason to hope and to joy. It gives reason to keep on living. Blessings on you all. Have a wonderful Easter.